In this video, I want to explain how narcissists slowly break empaths. And this one might hit quite deeply for some of you, so I just want to warn you now. Because I think a lot of people watching this have spent years trying to explain a feeling they could never fully put into words. You just knew something was happening to you emotionally. You probably felt yourself changing along the way, and you weren't quite sure what it is. You felt yourself becoming more anxious, more tired, more unsure of yourself. And yet from the outside, the relationship may have looked completely normal. That's what makes these relationships so psychologically confusing. They do not always destroy people loudly. A lot of the damage happens quietly, behind closed doors, little by little. Until one day, the empath wakes up and realizes they barely recognize themselves anymore. And what's strange is this: most empaths felt it very early on. They felt it really early. That is the part I think people need to trust more. I've spoken to so many people who say things like, I noticed things at the start that just didn't sit right with me. Or they might say, I kept feeling confused after conversations. I started doubting myself constantly when I was with this person. I felt lonely, even when we were together. And what happens next is where the real damage starts to begin, because empaths like yourself naturally self-reflect. They look inwards first. They want to understand. They want connection. They want peace. So instead of trusting the discomfort that they're feeling, instead of thinking, what could be going on with that other person, they explain it away. Maybe they are stressed. Maybe they had a hard childhood. Maybe they are scared of intimacy. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I just need to communicate better. And meanwhile, the empath slowly starts disconnecting from their own instincts that are actually correct. That's one of the biggest ways narcissists break people psychologically. Not through one huge, massive event, but through constant emotional erosion, slowly teaching you not to trust what you see or what you even feel. And what makes it worse is that narcissistic relationships are often built on contradiction. At the start, they can feel incredibly, intensely emotional. You probably know this. You probably felt very chosen, very wanted, very special, and very, very important or different, special to that person. Then suddenly the emotional temperature just changes. And nobody talks enough about how destabilizing that can feel for an empath. 1 week they're obsessed with you. The next, they're cold and distant. One day they're affectionate. They want everything to be with you. They want to be totally just together. The next, they act irritated by your emotions. One moment you feel emotionally safe. The next, you feel like you're walking on eggshells, trying not to upset them. And because empaths are emotionally very adaptive people, they start shape-shifting to stabilize the relationship, even though it's the relationship that's toxic. Now, this part's really, really important. They shape-shift. So they become calmer, softer, more patient, more understanding. They start monitoring tone, timing, mood, or, for example, energy. They become hyper-aware of emotional changes inside the relationship. And after a while, the empath stops feeling like themselves naturally. They start becoming whoever keeps the relationship peaceful, the person that they've created. And that's exhausting. By the way, just quickly, if you're new here, my name's Brandon. I have over 1 million people follow my daily insights across all social media platforms. And if you're finding this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you just liked the video and let me know what you found helpful in the comments, and consider subscribing, because I make new videos like this every week. Now, here is something people massively underestimate. Narcissists do not just hurt empaths through cruelty, a lot of the damage comes from inconsistency. And inconsistency creates anxiety. Your nervous system never fully settles. You start living emotionally on call, checking their mood before speaking, replaying conversations afterwards, wondering if you said the wrong thing, feeling relief when they're in a good mood, feeling tension when they walk through the door. And many empaths do not even realize how much stress they are carrying until the relationship ends. I've spoken to people who develop panic attacks, hair loss, insomnia, constant stomach issues, brain fog, and just emotional numbness. And what is heartbreaking is how many of them still defend the narcissist while slowly falling apart internally, because empaths do not stop loving that easily. They keep trying to understand. That is why these relationships become so psychologically addictive. The empath keeps chasing emotional clarity that they're never going to get. They keep thinking, if I can just explain myself better, maybe we can get back to how things felt before. But what many empaths eventually realize, what they'll eventually come to is this. The beginning often was not emotional safety. It was simply emotional intensity. And there is a huge difference with this. Intensity can feel very similar to connection in the early stages, especially to deeply empathetic people. Now, this part, I think a lot of people are going to feel it a little bit in their chest, so sorry about that. But many empaths are not traumatized by what actually happened to them. They're traumatized by what never happened. Now, let me explain. The reassurance they were waiting for, the accountability they hoped for, the emotional safety they kept trying to earn, the calm conversation that somehow always turned into confusion, the feeling of never fully being emotionally chosen. And after enough time inside that dynamic, the empath starts abandoning parts of themselves just to survive emotionally. They stop expressing needs, stop speaking openly, stop reacting honestly, and they stop trusting their own intuition until eventually they become a quieter version of themselves. And I mean, if you're sat there thinking that might be you, let me explain that it's not because you're weak, because it's because your nervous system adapted to emotional instability. And some of you listening to this right now, you were not what you think. You were not too sensitive. You were emotionally overloaded for a very, very long time. And 100% you might have been called this. You were not crazy. You were trying to make sense of constant emotional contradictions. You were not hard to love. You were trying to emotionally connect with someone who often experienced relationships through control, validation, and self-interest instead of vulnerability. That changes the way you see the entire relationship, because the damage was never just the arguments that you might have had. It was the slow loss of self-trust that you need to get back. Healing starts when the empath finally reconnects with themselves again. Not when they finally get the apology. Not when the narcissist suddenly understands that's not going to happen. But when they stop needing permission to trust what they felt all along. Because most empaths knew something was wrong long before they ever admitted it out loud. And once they fully reconnected with that intuition again, the manipulation stops working the same way. Think about it. What were you pretending not to know in the relationship? Have a think about that and write it down, or let me know in the comments. That's why healed empaths become so powerfully emotional. Not because they become cold, but because they finally stop abandoning themselves to keep somebody feeling comfortable that doesn't deserve it. Now, if this video helped, I'm going to put another one on the screen right now that I think you'll find helpful. Check it out and let me know.